Hi, my name is Jake Wood, and I want to start by saying I really greatly, truly appreciate the opportunity to deliver this talk to you gentlemen today, the day before the Marine Corps birthday. I apologize for not being there in person. I had planned to be down in San Diego this Friday to talk with all of you and shake your hands and tell you a little bit about myself and what it is that I'm doing with Team Rubicon. Unfortunately, the nature of Team Rubicon is disaster relief, and as you all well know, Hurricane Sandy has recently wreaked major havoc all across the East Coast. I will give you a little bit of an update about what it is that we're doing out here, out east with Hurricane Sandy, but before I get into that, I want to really tell you a little bit about myself and the organization that I have co-founded, Team Rubicon, and continue to run now as president. I grew up in the Midwest, and I ended up playing football at the University of Wisconsin from 2001 to 2005. In my freshman year, the attacks of 9/11 happened, and that had a huge impact on me. I was on a football scholarship at the time. I was playing offensive tackle for the Wisconsin Badgers, and it was very tempting at that moment to walk away, from the sport and from the school and enlist into the military. I had a sense of patriotism overwhelm me, and I don't know what it was, but something talked me into not doing it at that time. And then obviously over the course of the next 4 years, our country got embroiled in a war in Afghanistan, and then there were the months and years that led up to the war in Iraq. And being a college student on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus in the build-up to the war in Iraq, you can imagine what the tone was. And it wasn't very healthy dialogue, but it had a really deep impact on me in the way I looked at service and our obligation to our country. I continued to play football, and then right before my senior year in 2004, Pat Tillman was killed in Afghanistan. And Pat Tillman had been really a big role model in my life. I just thought that the man had lived his life like men should. And so it was within days of Pat Tillman's death that I decided that I was going to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. So I finished up my last season, graduated, and I chose to enlist. At that time, in 2005, the war had really shifted, and everyone that I talked to said that the war was a squad war. It was being led by corporals and sergeants on the ground, on the streets, and that if I truly wanted to go and lead men in combat, that it was best to enlist and become a squad leader. So I heeded that advice, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps and did my training at San Diego, MCRD San Diego, and eventually School of Infantry at Camp Pendleton. I was stationed with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines out in 29 Palms, probably the worst duty station in the entire U.S. military, let alone the Marine Corps, and was assigned as a rifleman in a fire team. And a couple of months later, I was deployed to Iraq as a fire team leader as part of the surge in the Anbar province. And within a couple of weeks, my unit was attacked. My squad leader was wounded and sent home. We took a KIA. And a few days later, I was field meritoriously promoted to corporal and given charge of the squad. For the next 7 months, our battalion operated in and around Fallujah and really had a very tough deployment. As a lot of the Marine units did in the Anbar province back then, it was pretty tough. And when we came home, I had a decision to make. I was a newly minted squad leader, corporal, about to pick up sergeant, and part of me was drawn to the sniper platoon. And I ended up taking the sniper platoon indoc, and was able to pass, and eventually I was sent to sniper school, and I graduated. In fact, I graduated at the top of my class, which is something that I'm very proud of, because in the first 1 to 2 weeks, I was very close to failing, really close to failing. But I was able to pull it together and pass. And my graduation present was a trip to Afghanistan, and we went to Afghanistan as part of the surge there. We operated in the Helmand Valley, my sniper team, for 7 months, and we came home. When I came home, I had a decision to make. It was about that time where I needed to either decide to re-enlist or to get out. And part of me was really drawn towards re-enlisting, and I considered it and I mulled it over. I just felt like I had yet more to give. On the other hand, I knew that I'd had a lot of close calls, and I knew that another deployment on my mother would kill her. So I opted to get out, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a civilian. So I started to apply to graduate schools, and I thought I was going to go get my MBA. And I finished my last MBA application, and I was waiting around in an apartment in Los Angeles, California, and I got a rejection letter from Stanford in Stanford's MBA program. And 2 days later, the earthquake hit the city of Port-au-Prince in the nation of Haiti. And I was sitting there for the first 12 hours watching, CNN, Fox News, NBC, and I was just watching these images come out of Port-au-Prince, images of destruction and chaos. And I continued to hear the reporters and the anchors talk about how, it was too dangerous, it was too chaotic to get help to the people that needed it. And I sat there and I thought to myself, Port-au-Prince isn't any more dangerous than Fallujah right now. Certainly no more dangerous than the Helmand Valley in Afghanistan. And I thought, after 4 years of combat training and leadership, I have an opportunity to go down there and provide a lot of aid. So I called up a couple of organizations who all refused to let me go. And eventually I decided that, it was time for me to act, that inaction was not an option. And so I posted on Facebook that I wanted to go to Haiti, and within minutes, literally, a Marine that I knew out of Washington, D.C. named William McNulty called me up and he said, "Jake, I want in." And so we set the plans in motion to get down to Port-au-Prince, and within 4 days we were on the ground in Port-au-Prince, and we started operating mobile medical triage clinics across the city, going to places where nobody else would go, where nobody else could go, providing battlefield medicine. We had a team of 8 initially, almost all military veterans. And within 2 weeks, our numbers had swelled to 60 as word of what we were doing spread. And one night when we were back at our base camp, William approached me and he said, "Jake, I think we're onto something." I said, "Oh yeah, what's that?" He's like, "Nobody out here, all these other aid organizations, they all distrust the military. Nobody realizes what it is that we're bringing to the table." And I said, "You know what, you're right. We have been doing exactly this for 10 years on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, and nobody's paying attention. We have 2.5 million veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and nobody's asking them to participate, to put those skills back to use for a greater good, to help their neighbors in times of disaster. Those skills are coming back home and they're just sitting on the sidelines." So we decided that we were going to pursue this, and we were going to call it Team Rubicon. And since then, for the last 3 years, we've been building Team Rubicon, and we saw it really as an opportunity to improve disaster response when we first started. We said, you know what, disaster response is slow, it's inadequate, it's not putting the best skills to use, and military veterans coming off the battlefield have the opportunity to make a difference. And for the first year, that's what we did. We focused on international operations that had a medical capacity. We went to Chile after the earthquake and tsunami down there. We went to Burma and trained refugee medics along the Thai-Burma border. We went to Pakistan after the flooding devastated and displaced 20 million people. We also went to South Sudan, where a refugee crisis was growing between 2 warring tribes. And we continued to do these international operations, and while we were doing it, we realized something. 1, the logistics were really hard. And 2, we had more veterans that were trying to get involved with our activities than we could ever possibly engage internationally. And so we started to think, what can we do to really expand the scope of what we're doing? Because all these veterans are coming to us and telling us, this is what I've been looking for. This is it. This is what I've been trying to get involved with ever since I got out of the military. Unfortunately, we didn't take action on this until a tragedy struck our organization. In March of 2011, my best friend, a gentleman that I served with in both Iraq and Afghanistan, my sniper partner at sniper school, and a guy that I served with in a sniper team for 7 months in Afghanistan, took his own life. And his suicide was a tragedy. And unfortunately, it's a tragedy that military veterans are suffering all across this country every single day. And I can't explain to you why that's happening. I can't possibly explain or posit what it is. But I know that Clay's situation wasn't unique. He came home a proud Marine with 2 combat tours and a Purple Heart. And he came back to a society that didn't care about the war, that didn't care about his service. He went to school on the GI Bill, and he didn't care about his studies because, it didn't give him what the Marine Corps had given him. It didn't give him what combat had given him. And what we realized is that Clay had lost his mission. He had lost his community, his band of brothers, and he had lost his sense of self, his identity. And what we understood was that Team Rubicon and the mission that we provide have the opportunity to provide this purpose, this community, this sense of self that Clay was lacking. And we realized that if we were to do ourselves justice and our fellow veterans justice, we owed it to ourselves to engage as many of them as possible in disaster relief. And so we launched our domestic program. And in March of 2011, only 3 weeks after Clay's memorial service, a devastating tornado hit Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And Team Rubicon was on the ground within 24 hours. We were doing search and rescue operations, debris management operations, sheltering. And shortly after that, the tornado hit Joplin, Missouri. And once again, we did it. We deployed a platoon of veterans, Marines, and soldiers and sailors. And they did it again. And throughout 2011, we started to expand this domestic operation. And what we saw was that we were getting more veterans involved and that we were seeing these communities build. And we were having veterans come to us unsolicited and say, this is it. You know, this is what I've been looking for. We've had veterans go so far as to say, this has saved my life. I found Team Rubicon at the lowest point in my life, and I think it saved my life. And we've grown tremendously. In 2011, we ran 8 total missions. This year in 2012, already we've run over 25. We started this year with only 800 volunteers. We just crossed the 5,000 volunteer mark this week. So let me tell you what exactly it is that we're doing with Hurricane Sandy right now. Team Rubicon has organized its 5,000 volunteers across the country into 10 geographic regions. And as we watched Hurricane Sandy bear down on the East Coast, we activated regions 1, 2, and 3 along the eastern seaboard. We mobilized 11 teams of emergency first responders, all veterans, to stand up and fight Sandy's storm. We had veterans staffing the Emergency Operations Center of Brooklyn, New York, the day before the storm hit, and they ran jump operations from the Emergency Operations Center for the first 48 hours of the storm, providing search and rescue for the overwhelmed city services. Up from DC all the way to New York, we had up to 12 teams doing chainsaw strike teams, clearing roads so that utility workers could get back in, clearing homes so that residents could return and return to normalcy, mucking homes and mucking flooded houses along the coastline that were flooded with the storm surge. And here we are 10 days later. We've deployed over 300 veterans already. And this Veterans Day, we formed a coalition of all the leading veteran organizations from around the country. 15 organizations will come out and join us on Sunday, November 11th, Veterans Day. A unified task force of military veterans numbering a battalion size over 1,000 strong. We're going to go into the Rockaways of New York, just south of Queens, and we're going to completely turn that community around. And we're going to show New York, the greater New York State region, New Jersey, the East Coast, and the United States, the power of military veterans and what they can bring to our communities as they return home. And I would love nothing more than for you to support our cause. Our resources have been stretched thin. We're maxed out. If you can't tell, I haven't slept much in the last 10 days. We're at a time right now, a turning point, a tipping point in our organization. We truly feel that we are on the verge of becoming the preeminent veteran service organization in this country. We feel that we can offer things that other veteran organizations are failing to offer post 9/11 veterans. The idea that veterans these days want to come home and return to dark, smoky beer halls at the VFW or the American Legion is outdated and it's wrong. You can simply see it in the numbers. And that's unfortunate, because I think the American Legion and the VFW are tremendous organizations. But what our veterans are lacking is that sense of purpose and that sense of community. And that's what we can provide. We're going to take the skills that they cultivated on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're going to reapply it so that they can be useful to their neighbors at home. So that when crisis happens in their communities, those communities look to their military veterans to be the leaders that they are. And we're doing that right now in 10 regions across the country, and next year we'll be doing it in 50 states. And 5 years from now, we want to be in every single zip code, in every single county across this country. And so with that, gentlemen, I'd like to wish you a very, very happy Marine Corps birthday. I'm sure that if I were there, I'd be the youngest one there, and I'd probably be taking part in the cake cutting ceremony. With that, thank you very much. I hope to someday make it down to your lunch and meet you all in person. But until that day, Semper Fidelis.